And now, a Native Podcast with Matt and Zach.
And welcome back to another Native Podcast. I am Zach, and with me is always Matt. I just got to say, how you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty well, my man. Doing pretty well. It's been a little minute since we've been on one of these.
Yeah, I know we've taken quite a break. That's why we schedule these out so long in advance. But as the viewers know, that's just part of who we are. You know, we're on Indian time. We got other projects and things too. So again, we're doing this in our free time. You know, this isn't we're not getting paid to do this. This isn't our work. There's no grant money behind this. There's no money at all. This is just me and Matt sitting down, getting on Zoom, saying, "Hey, how you doing, buddy?" and talking Indian Country 101. And if you have a problem with that or have something to say, or hey, maybe you know someone that wants to be interviewed and they want to jump on the podcast and chat with us, definitely we would love to hear that. So reach out to us at gng@gng.net. That is G as in garden gnome, N as in Nancy, G as in garden gnome again at gng.net, just like that. And Matt will respond to you. Don't know how long it might be. He checks it frequently. It's not all the time, but definitely be fun.
Once a week. You'll hear back within a week.
Within a week, he says, within a week. But if this podcast is coming out, you know, like I said, we record these well in advance. Just because, you know, we got lives. We're busy. It's all right. But I don't know. How have you been? What you typically have a fact or something neat or something we would need to chat about?
With my little tidbit of it's more of a news headline. Many of you might have heard of the our great well, I say our because my tribe's there, but the great governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, decided to make some very controversial comments about our border with Mexico and saying things about cartels running stuff on the reservations. And our tribe decided to ban her from tribal land.
Right.
And I'm sure some of you may have heard about that, but it's just asserting tribal sovereignty at its finest right there. And
right.
And it was a very like she didn't have all her information and she went down to Texas and it was really nothing directly related to tribes in her state. So it's like it was just a very odd thing to talk about. Everyone
Yeah, how she's using that and manipulating the facts to sound right. Huh, interesting.
So tribes can ban governors apparently. So
yeah, I mean it's interesting, but that it makes sense, right? Because that's the federal versus the state level, and that federal sovereignty that means so much. And when you look at just our podcast episode on sovereignty, tribal sovereignty, you know, we kind of dive into that, but just kind of how tribes access that right, you know, and part of accessing that right comes from treaties, right? And another good episode that we did on treaties, but kind of opening up today, and today's kind of a new topic is we're talking about kind of like treaties, like we're gonna break them down for you. Today is the Fort Laramie Treaty, you know, kind of a famous one. You hear it cited a lot in modern day history and in, you know, back in times kind of history as well. Which I'm excited to talk about today. I'm excited to go down this path because I think we are going to learn as well, me and Matt, as we go down this path with you guys. And we're kind of documenting it. So I'm excited. I know this treaty affects Matt and the Oglala people, so I know this is kind of personal.
I kind of wanted that headline because it's relating to where our sovereignty and the lands and all that comes from. As well as tribes in the region too, which I'm going to mention here.
Nice. Well, I mean, go ahead. I'll let you. You're kind of leading this ship, so I'm gonna let you take over and
all right,
kind of kick us off with the Fort Laramie Treaty.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull up this map here while I talk about this one. It's just very helpful so our viewers can see here. So this is the original 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty as found by the Indian Claims Commission. As you can see here, the majority of which is in the western half of South Dakota. You have kind of the Cannonball and Cedar River areas of North Dakota. That was the Hunkpapa Sioux area. And if people remember Cannonball River, that was the Dakota pipeline protest was right where that river and the Missouri meet, right about there. And then you got the far southeastern corner, two segments of Montana, and then you have the northeast corner of Wyoming, and then you have the northwest corner of Nebraska. Some of these excess spillover lands or kind of more tribal common hunting lands, as you would call them, extended to the Bighorn Mountains and even into the corner of Colorado, I was reading the full extent of this area. So it's a huge land treaty in the center of the Great Plains. It's referenced often, as Zach said. So I was gonna read. So there's another section. Well, I'll get off the map here. I was gonna read the tribes associated with this because this is interesting to me. So the original 1851 treaty was also known as the negotiations at Horse Creek. Horse Creek was about 35 miles east of the Fort Laramie, the actual fort. So on September 17th of 1851, the Fort Laramie Treaty was signed by leaders of the Arapaho, Arikara, Assiniboine, Cheyenne, Crow, some Grovants were even involved with this, Mandan, Shoshone, and Lakota nations. Each nation was assigned a territory that generally overlapped with where its people already lived and hunted, although all nations were permitted to hunt on each other's land. In exchange for a continued sovereignty over their own affairs, Indian nations agreed to keep the peace between themselves and with Americans to allow the government to build forts and roads in their territory. Just the last part of this here. As compensation for previous intrusions on Indian land, the government promised to distribute $50,000 in annuities among all 9 nations for 10 years, provided they adhere to the terms of the treaty. Each nation then selected delegates to tour the eastern United States. These trips were designed to showcase the wealth and power of the United States so that Indian nations would abide by the treaty. Yeah, and this just goes into more about Colorado. This is the Colorado site here with this, but it's interesting to me, some of these other ones like the Assiniboine, like I would not have thought, and some of the Shoshone were involved because of those excess kind of multi-tribal areas, like a Bozeman, Montana, and Montana would be like an area that's common hunting,
Yep.
and was commonly shared by tribes.
No, and it makes sense because when you talk about like the common hunting grounds and stuff, I always remember Montana in kind of from my education and understanding of what Montana was for Indian people too, as a kind of like Indian safe haven at one point. Not for a long time though. Like it was, as these states were getting rid of natives, like you look at Colorado and Wyoming, right? Like especially in that map, right? How they're starting to shave those tribes out of that area and say, no, you need to go to these areas. Montana to me was open for a little while, and then I think Butte and the Copper and that really kind of changed it, but you don't really hear much about that, and that's something that I find interesting because there were different times in history where the United States government was going to try and leave that land alone, leave places like the Montana Territory or just various places in the West, the Black Hills and whatnot alone, and then they just didn't. And that's why these treaties came into place too.
Well, and then as you're going to get into here to the 1868 one in a bit, the discovery of gold changes things in many places for tribes. we'll talk about it on another episode, I'm sure, but I want to get into the California tribes and how the gold, which, not to touch on it too much, but just briefly, I
Go
think
ahead.
some of the California tribes had some of the most brutal, bloody, like massacres that people don't talk about.
Well, isn't that where the term redskin comes from? Is the scalping of like California natives and the 49ers going out there and
They were
like,
encouraged to scalp natives because they were given $200 in that day per Indian male scalp.
yes, over there in California, correct? Yeah. And that's like that's part of it. And that's it's funny you saw the Chiefs and the 49ers in the Super Bowl. And then right behind the Chiefs logo, it says end racism yet.
Right.
Great example. Great
Oh,
example.
there are a lot of natives talking about those two teams. Like it's kind of like, oh, that's not a good image for natives, like either one.
Right.
It's what the 49er gold miners did, California Indians, and what the chief imagery and all that too.
Well, and it's funny they try and act like it's a nickname, but then you look at like the old logos of the Chiefs and it's an Indian head.
Oh yeah.
And it's the when you ask natives from a native perspective, it's the like, the tomahawk chant isn't your chant. The the imagery, like when you see like the fans dress up like natives, like, nah, dude, nah, like that's what it is. It's like the name is one thing, but it's like what goes beyond the name is the other. And that's the problem.
And non-native people get so attached to these, like our high schools always, like Roseburg was the Indian. I think they still are, to be honest.
Who
But
gives a fuck though? Like change it. Like if it like
yeah,
why do you gotta like fight for like certain things like that? Like it's a name, it's a mascot. Like make it an animal. Everyone's like animals in that way.
no, exactly. But yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
yeah, the 1851 was the original. As I showed you the land, it was much larger in the multi-state. Um, but I'll go ahead and turn it over to you with you wanted to talk about the 1868 treaty.
Yeah, and that's kind of the one where a lot of the things are cited. And I'm actually going to read from archives.gov, and they have a pretty good transcript of the treaty and who signed it. And I think that's where you got some of your information as well, as the archives.gov has some really good information. I'm going to give a brief history real quick. In this treaty signed on April 29th, 1868, between the U.S. government and the Sioux Nation, the United States recognized the Black Hills as part of the Great Sioux Reservation, set aside for exclusive use by the Sioux people. In the 19th century, the U.S. government's drive for expansion clashed violently with Native Americans' resolve to preserve their lands, sovereignty, and ways of life. The struggle over the land has defined the relationship between the U.S. government and Native tribes. From the 1860s through the 1870s, warfare and skirmishes broke out frequently on the American frontier. In 1865, a congressional committee studied the uprisings and wars in the American West. They produced a report on the condition of the Indian tribes in 1867. This led to an act to establish an Indian Peace Commission to end the wars and prevent future conflicts. The U.S. government set out to establish a series of treaties with Native tribes that would force American Indians to give up their lands and move further west onto reservations. In the spring of 1868, a conference which was held at Fort Laramie in present-day Wyoming, which resulted in a treaty with the Sioux, Burl Oglala, the Miniconjou, Yanktonai, Hunkpapa, Blackfeet, Cuthead, Two Kettle, Sans Arcs, and Santee, and the Arapaho. The goal of the treaty was to bring peace between the white settlers and the tribes, who agreed to relocate to the Black Hills in the Dakota Territory. All the tribes involved gave up many thousands of acres of land that had been promised in earlier treaties, but retained hunting and fishing rights in the older territory. And that's what you're talking about in the 1851. They also agreed not to attack railroads or settlers. In exchange, the U.S. government established the Great Sioux Reservation, consisting of a large portion of the western half of which is now the state of South Dakota, including the Black Hills, which are sacred to the Sioux people. Though the reservation land was set aside for exclusive use by the Sioux people, in 1874, General Custer led an expedition into the Black Hills, accompanied by miners who were seeking gold. Once gold was found in the Black Hills, miners were soon moving on to the Sioux hunting grounds and demanding protection from the U.S. Army. Soon, the Army was ordered to move against the wandering bands of Sioux hunting on the range in accordance with their treaty rights. In 1876, Custer, leading an Army detachment, encountered an encampment of Sioux and Cheyenne at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Custer's detachment was annihilated, but the United States would continue its battle against the Sioux tribe in the Black Hills until the government confiscated the land in 1877. To this day, ownership of the Black Hills remains the subject of a legal dispute between the U.S. government and the Great Sioux Nation. So that's just kind of a little history.
No, that I'm glad you brought that up. I do have another map to show.
Go ahead.
That showed based on that treaty. I wanted to share this. So what Zach just talked about, this is the map on the left was the 1868 treaty, as you can see, was the western half of South Dakota, basically west of the Missouri River.
Right.
And the unceded territories around, and then Nebraska was like the southern hunting grounds. And then today, the present day Sioux reservations in South Dakota, and as you can see, the Black Hills, right, are excluded from their current land, as well as Bear Butte, which is a sacred site, as well. And that's where, like, being Lakota, like a lot of like Lakota people are like, the land is worth more than the money, because the amount owed the Sioux is like over 2 billion now.
Oh yeah, because it's just sitting there in a fund, right?
Just sitting there, and non-native people will be like, oh, why don't they take it? You guys can pull yourself out of poverty. And it's like, even that, like, really won't split up among the tribes. Like,
No, they want the land.
yeah, they want the land, and that's at the core of being native. The land is, of any tribe, right, is the most important thing. That's your identity. That's who you are. So it's
Hey
a
man, you get when the Muslims want Mecca, you get when the Christians want Israel, you get when these larger groups, these religious groups want that holy land. That's what this is too. You know, this is the Black Hills. That's the birthplace. They came out of the hills onto the earth.
all the stories, and that's why you guys getting recognized by the government and getting some land in Great Falls, and maybe, other places in Montana soon. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal.
Well, that's all it is the different treaties and the fact that like Little Shell never signed a treaty. He he kept running around. You
Yeah.
know, when you look at our agreement, and that's the thing is the US government stopped signing treaties with tribes. They made it a law, right? They're like, we're done doing this. There was the era of no more treaties. And then we in present day, so when you're not recognized through a treaty as a tribe,
Mhm.
you have to go through a process, and it's a fucking process. The Little Shell went through it for 100 years. That's how long that process took.
So,
And part of it was the fact that Little Shell never signed a treaty. He didn't agree to the Turtle Mountain one. So then he
Mhm.
kept moving on, kept moving on, kept moving on, kept doing his thing, kept pushing on. I'm going to go hunt Montana. We're going to hunt Montana. We can hunt Montana, all that. And then here we are, 2019, we have to attach basically our federal recognition to a bill. So the United States, through their process, through a bill, is how it happened. So a lot grew. It's a process, but that's what it is.
Yeah, and that's why tribal sovereignty is so important. And also, like, our past podcasts on treaty rights, when we talked
Right.
about Crow Hunter going into the Bighorns, well, that was part of this, and he was asserting a treaty right.
Right.
And because it was winter and they were low on meat, and they're like, well, let's go up in the Bighorns. And honestly, they may not have known they were across the res into Wyoming.
I
But
think that's part of it, is that like, yeah, like you're up that, like, that's there because like there's no imaginary lines in nature, right? the Bighorn Mountains, those common hunting grounds were the line, right? Like that, like you're saying, the river. It's like, other side of the Missouri, we're not going that far.
Yeah.
Like we ain't going to the east side of South Dakota.
Mhm.
Right. We're going to stay over here. That's our side. This is our hills. These are our rivers. It's our elk. These are our bison. It's all we need. We're happy here.
Well, and we had this common knowledge with other tribes, even that whether we were so-called enemies or not, we're like, oh, this mountain range on this side's our people and this other side's another people. And when we go through their land, if we have good relations, we respectfully pass through or whatever we're doing, right? Because you're
One of my famous quotes that I like to use is 1803, right? Well, this isn't really a quote. It's more of like one of my sources, right? 1803, Lewis Clark, Sacagawea, right? Fort Mandan. 1803, you're in Fort Mandan, North Dakota, aka Bismarck, North Dakota, if you're in modern day. Okay. You are meeting up with these people. You're talking because he's a French fur trapper, Toussaint Charbonneau, Sacagawea's husband, meeting up with Sacagawea. You're meeting up with his other wife. Yep. People don't even know that he had another wife. Meeting up with him. Well, she's Shoshone. She speaks Shoshone. Oh, well, we know if we're going west, okay, this 1803, they know back then, Lewis and Clark, Fort Mandan, they knew if they were headed west, they're going to need a Shoshone translator because they're going to need horses to cross the Great Mountains, the Great Divide. Just saying, man. Just saying.
Well, if I'm correct, Sacagawea's band, the Shoshone, was right there near the Montana border area.
Beaverhead, Dillon, Montana. Yeah.
Right. And so
Bitterroot Valley, one of the most expensive valleys in America right now.
Out in the Snake River all the way to Oregon. It's like that was a strategic.
Yep.
For her to,
But she knew of the Bozeman Pass. She knew of how to get to the Yellowstone River, to the Crow people. She knew of the Three Forks area. She knew of getting down to Beaver Head, right? All these different places in Montana that, like, this is where you travel. This is where we hunt. I know this trail. They exist because they have existed for thousands of years, right?
Your band hunted in Bozeman for sure.
Yeah.
Where they were. Yeah. Yeah.
Everywhere. Think about it. Why would you know the Bozeman Trail is from Bozeman to Livingston, right?
Yeah.
That's going into Crow country because Livingston used to be the Crow headquarters, right? The Crow agency.
And if you look at the Bozeman Trail, because it went through Cheyenne, Wyoming, and then followed what is now like where Casper is up to Bighorns, up to Billings. That was the route, right? It went right on it.
Well, you wouldn't necessarily go all the way to Billings. They would with the river,
but
sometimes they would stick to the mountains, just depending. But like exactly what you're saying, man. Like this, it wasn't like, oh man, you found the West. It was no, the Europeans are now understanding the West.
Did you know there's a new native apparel company?
No, I did not.
It's called Shop LS 574, named after the 574 federal tribes and the Little Shell descendancy of its founders.
Wow, that's really cool, man.
It is. It is becoming a spot to order native apparel by and for natives, working with native designers and teams to help best represent Indian country.
That's awesome, dude.
For sure. Now make sure to go pick up some Native podcast swag as well as other native gear while shopping at shopls574.com.
Oh, yeah. And do not forget to use code ANP10 to save on your next order.
That's ANP10. Hey, Matt, did you know there's a tribally owned net company?
No, I did not.
Not only are they tribally owned, but Blue Ribbon Nets also creates totally sustainable products. With Blue Ribbon Nets, not only are you getting quality nets, but even eco-friendly ones as well.
That's awesome, dude.
It sure is indeed. Make sure to use code RUGAROO10 on your next Blue Ribbon Net order to save. Again, the code is RUGAROO10, RUGARU10.
I am definitely getting a Blue Ribbon Net now.
Tune in every Tuesday to hear your favorite Native podcast.
That's right. A Native podcast has new episodes every week. ranging from boarding schools to Indian child welfare.
Not only that, but we have Indian country covered from Maine to California and Florida to Alaska, Hopi to Blackfeet and Choctaw to Tlingit, and all those Crees in between.
And all you other natives and non-natives out there, we want to remind you to tune in this Tuesday to A Native Podcast.
Is your Res Runner in need of new lights? Well, look no further than our friends at Oxteo, an industry leader in LED lights. Make sure to use code RUGARU on your next set of lights. That's RUGARU.
I want to get into that treaty a little bit. I don't know if we'll finish it today, if whatever, but
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to get in. They had a bunch of articles, and I'm just going to start with Article 1. From this day forward, and this is kind of what was decided, right? From this day forward, all war between the parties to this agreement shall ever cease. The government of the United States desires peace, and its honor is hereby pledged to keep it. The Indians desire peace, and they now pledge their honor to maintain it. If bad men among the whites or among the people subject to the authority of the United States shall commit any wrong upon the person or property of the Indians, the United States will, upon proof, make to the agent and forwarded to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs at Washington City. Proceed at once to cause the offender to be arrested and punished according to the laws of the United States, and also reimburse the injured person for the loss sustained. If bad men among the Indians shall commit a wrong or deprecation upon the person or property of nay one, white, black, or Indian subject to the authority of the United States, and at peace therewith, the Indians herein named solemnly agree that they will, upon proof made to their agent, and notice by him, deliver up the wrongdoer to the United States, and to be tried and punished according to the laws. And in the case they willingly refuse so to do, the person injured shall be reimbursed for his loss for the annuities or other monies due to become due to them under this or other treaties made with the United States, and the President, on advising with Commissioner of Indian Affairs, shall prescribe such rules and regulations for asserting damages under the provisions of this article as in his judgment may be proper. But no one sustaining the loss while violating those provisions of this treaty of the laws of the United States shall be reimbursed therefor. Basically saying you commit a crime, you're going to be treated like a U.S. citizen.
Right.
Article 2. What? Yeah, something.
No, I was like, wow, like it's like you have like really no rights, but yet if you do something wrong, you have rights all of a sudden.
Right.
In a weird way, the way I'm thinking of it.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. I get what you mean. Article 2, the United States agrees that the following district of the country, to wit, viz., commencing on the east bank of the Missouri River, where the 46th parallel of north latitude crosses the same, thence allowing low water mark said east bank to point opposite where the northern line of the state of Nebraska strikes the river, thence west across said river and along the northern line of Nebraska to the 104th degree of longitude west from Greenwich. Thence north said meridian to at which point the 46th parallel of north latitude intercepts the same. Thence due east along said parallel to the place of the beginning, and in addition thereto all existing reservations of the east bank of said river shall be, and the same is set apart for the absolute and undisturbed use of occupation of the Indians herein named, and for such other friendly tribes or individual Indians as from time to time they may be willing, with the consent of the United States, to admit amongst them. And the United States now solemnly agrees that no person except those herein designated and authorized to do so, and except such officers, agents, and employees of the government as may be authorized to enter upon Indian reservations in discharge of duties enjoined by law, shall ever be permitted to pass over, settle upon, or reside in the territory described in this article, or in such territory as may be added to this reservation for the use of said Indians. And henceforth they will be, and hereby relinquish all claims, right, and any portion to the United States or territories, except such as embraced within the limits aforesaid, and except as hereinafter provided. So basically laying out the land, that this is your native land, the rest is the U.S. Kind of laid out. Article 3, if it should appear to be from actual survey or other satisfactory examination of said tract of land that contains less than 160 acres of tillable land for each person who at time may be authorized to reside on it under the provisions of this treaty, and very considerable number of such persons shall be disposed to commence cultivating the soil as farmers. The United States agrees to set apart for the use of said Indians as herein provided such additional quantity of arable land adjoining to said reservation or as near to the same as it can be obtained as may be required to provide the necessary amount. So setting up the farmlands.
Setting us up to be farmers, something we
Yeah.
never
Right. Article 4, the United States agrees at its own proper expense to construct at some point place on the Missouri River near the center of said reservation where timber and water may be convenient. The following buildings, to wit, a warehouse, a storeroom for the use of the agent in storing goods belonging to the Indians, to cost no less than $2,500. An agency building for the residence of the agent to cost not exceeding $3,000. A resident for the physician to not cost more than $3,000, and 5 other buildings for a carpenter, farmer, blacksmith, miller, and engineer, each to cost not exceeding $2,000. Also, a schoolhouse or mission building, so soon as a sufficient number of children can be inducted by the agent to attend school, which shall not cost exceeding $5,000. The United States agrees further to cause to be erected on said reservation near the other buildings, herein authorized a good stem circular sawmill with a grist mill and a shingle machine attached to the same, to cost not exceeding $8,000. So laying it out, the costs are interesting.
Yeah,
Because that's back then terms.
right. That's funny.
But laying down basically the government, the United States government of what's going to take place on the reservation.
Right.
Article 5, the United States agrees that the agent for said Indian shall be in the future to make his home at the agency building, that he shall reside among them, to keep an office open at all times for the purpose of prompt and diligent inquiry into such matters of complaint by and against the Indians as may be presented for investigation under provisions under their treaty stipulations, as also for the faithful discharge of other duties enjoined on him by law. In all cases of depredation on person or property, he shall cause the evidence to be taken in writing and forwarded together with his findings to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, whose decision subject to the revision of the Secretary of Interior shall be binding on parties to this treaty. So just basically setting up the fact that there'll be an Indian agent and Indian office that's connected to the U.S. government. Secretary of Interior. That's why it was very important. Deb Haaland is Secretary of Interior. That was huge for Indian country for reasons like this. Article 6. If any individual belonging to said tribes of Indians or legally incorporated with them, being the head of a family, shall desire to commence farming, he shall have the privilege to select in the presence and with the assistance of the agent then in charge a tract of land within said reservation, not exceeding 320 acres in extent, which tract, when so selected, certified, and recorded in the land book, as herein directed, shall cease to be held in common. But the same may be occupied and held in the exclusive possession of the person selecting it and of his family, so long as he or they may continue cultivate it. Any person over 18 years of age, not being the head of family, may in like manner select and cause to be certified to him or her for purposes of cultivation a quantity of land not exceeding 80 acres in extent, and thereupon be entitled to the exclusive possession of the same as above directed. For each tract of land so selected as a certificate containing the description thereof and the name of the person selecting it with a certificate endorsed thereon that the same has been recorded shall be delivered to the party entitled to it by the agent after the same shall have been recorded by him in a book to be kept in his office, subject to inspection, which said book shall be known as the Sioux Land Book. The president may at time order a survey of the reservation, and when so surveyed, Congress shall provide for protecting the rights of said settlers in their improvements and may fix the character of the title held by each. The United States may pass such laws on subject of alienation and descent of property between the Indians and their descendants as may be thought proper. And is further stipulated that any male Indians over 18 years of age of any band or tribe that is or shall hereby become a party to this treaty, who now is, who shall hereafter become a resident or occupant of any reservation or territory not included in the tract of country designated and described in this treaty for the permanent home of the Indians, which is not mineral land, nor reserved by the United States for special purposes other than Indian occupation, and who shall have made improvements thereon of the value of $200 or more and continuously occupied the same homestead for the term of 3 years, shall be entitled to receive from the United States a patent for 160 acres in land, including said improvements, to the same to be legal in the form of the legal subdivisions of the surveys of the public land. Upon application in writing, sustained by the proof of two disinterested witnesses made to the register of the local land office, when the land sought to be entered is within a land district, and when the tract sought to be entered is not in any land district, then upon said application and proof being made to the commissioner of the general land office and rights of such Indian or Indians to enter such tracts of land shall accrue and be perfect from the date of his first improvements thereon, and shall continue as long as to be continues his residence and improvements and no longer. And any Indian or Indians receiving a patent for land under the foregoing provisions shall thereby and from hence become a citizen of the United States and be entitled to all privileges and immunities such as citizens, and shall at the same time retain his rights to benefits accruing to the Indians under this treaty. So that's a big one, but
Wow.
that's all about land.
Yeah, there's the 160 acres you're referring to. There's a really good movie that highlights this, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee.
Okay.
And it explains the Dawes allotment, explain this, but particularly with the Sioux. If
Okay.
you know more, that highlights it in a really easily understood way about, and really was kind of the system for all tribes, but they highlighted it well in that movie.
Well, that's good. No, I mean, that's definitely good for our listeners to tune into.
Great film. Yeah. Dawes Allotment Act, it highlights that really well too. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Article 7, in order to ensure the civilization of the Indians entering into this treaty, the necessity of education is admitted, especially of such of them as or may be settled on said agricultural reservations. And they therefore pledge themselves to compel their children, male and female, between the ages of 6 and 16 years old to attend school. And it is hereby made the duty of the agent for said Indians to see that this stipulation is strictly complied with. And the United States agrees that for every 30 children between the ages who can be induced or compelled to attend school, a house shall be provided, and a teacher competent to teach the elementary branches of English education shall be furnished, who will reside among said Indians, faithfully discharge his or her duties as a teacher. The provisions of this article to continue for not less than 20 years. So basically just saying they're setting up a schoolhouse, school teacher.
Wow.
Article 8, when the head of the family or lodge shall have selected lands and received his certificate as above directed, and the agent shall be satisfied that he intends good faith to commence cultivating soil for a living, he shall be entitled to receive seeds and agricultural implements for the first year, not exceeding in value $100. And for each succeeding year, he shall continue to farm for a period of 3 years or more. He shall be entitled to receive seeds and implements as foresaid, not exceeding in value $25. And it is further stipulated that such persons as commence farming shall receive instruction between the farmer herein provided for. And whenever more than 100 persons shall enter upon the cultivation of the soil, a second blacksmith shall be provided, with such iron, steel, and other material as may be needed. So it's setting up the farming.
Right.
Article 9, at any time after 10 years from making this treaty, the United States shall have the privilege of withdrawing the physician, farmer, blacksmith, carpenter, engineer, and miller herein provided for all, but in case of such withdrawal, an additional sum thereafter of $10,000 per annuum shall be devoted to the education of said Indians, and the commissioner of Indians shall, upon carefully inquire into their condition, make such rules and regulations for the expenditure of said sums and will best promote the education and moral improvements of said tribes. Article 10. This one's kind of long about children. In lieu of sums of money and other annuities provided to be paid to the Indians herein named under the treaties heretofore made, the United States agrees to deliver at Agency House on the reservation herein named on or before the first day of August of each year for 30 years the following articles, to wit: for each male person over 14 years of age, a suit of good substantial wool and clothing consisting of coat, pantaloons, flannel shirt, hat, and a pair of homemade socks. For each female over 12 years of age, a flannel shirt or the goods necessary to make it, a pair of woolen hose, 12 yards of calico, and 12 yards of cotton domestics. For the boys and girls under the ages named, such flannel and cotton goods may be needed to make a suit as foresaid, together within a pair of woolen hose for each. And in order that the Commissioner of Indian Affairs may be able to estimate properly for all articles herein named, it shall be the duty of the agent each year to forward him a full exact census of the Indians on which the estimate from year to year can be based. In addition to the clothing herein named, the sum of $10 for each person entitled to the beneficial effects of this treaty shall be annually appropriated for a period of 30 years. While such persons roam and hunt, and $20 for each person who engages in farming, to be used by the Secretary of Interior. So right there, they're giving them $10 more to go farm. To be used by the Secretary of Interior in the purchase of such articles as from time to time and condition and necessities of Indians may be indicate to be proper, and within 30 years at any time it shall appear that the amount of money needed for clothing under this article can be appropriated to better uses for the Indians named herein. Congress may by law change the appropriation to other purposes, but in no event shall the amount of the appropriation be withdrawn or discontinued for the period named. And the President shall annually detail an officer of the Army to be present and attest the delivery of all goods herein named to the Indians, and he shall inspect and report on the quantity and quality of the goods and the manner of their delivery. And it is hereby expressly stipulated that each Indian over the age of 4 years who have removed and settled permanently upon said reservation, 1 pound of meat and 1 pound of flour per day, providing the Indians cannot furnish their own subsistence at an earlier date. And it is further stipulated that the Indian states will furnish and deliver to each lodge of Indians or a family of persons legally incorporated with the who shall remove to the reservation herein described and commence farming, 1 good American cow, 1 good well broken pair of American oxen within 60 days after such lodge or family shall have settled upon said reservation. So setting up the clothing and food.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that's where the whole flour with the fry bread started, was during that time, and
Yeah.
it was not, it's a new thing that was introduced
A
from.
commodity. It's commodity food right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Government food. It's not necessarily the best, but it's quality. It checks the boxes.
It'll keep you fed in a cheap way. Right.
Right. Well, and that's I mean, my dad has a can of commodity food, a chicken or something. I know he's held on to it. So like I see that, and I know my grandpa, like he's talked about it, and then talked about like they had cardboard to insulate their home in Browning. And he says, I remember seeing a box of Dole bananas and being like, I wonder what what a banana tastes like.
Oh, wow.
That's my grandpa. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
And now music on a native podcast.
This week, I hope you know, Superman featuring Ashley Hall.
Hey ya ere ay ya ra hey ho eh. Hey ya ere ay ya ra hey ho eh. Hey ya ere ay ya ra hey ha ho eh. Hey ya ere ay ya ra hey ho eh. Ay oh hey oh hey oh hope you know I'll never break your heart in two. I hope you know there's no one else like you. Hey-oh, hey-oh, hey-oh. Hey-ya, 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 I hope you know I never wanna see you go. I hope you know you've always been the one. I hope you know I'll never break your heart in two. I hope you know there's no one else like you. Hey-oh, hey-oh, hey-oh. Hey-ya, ay-ya, hey-ho, hey. Hey-ya, ay-ya, hey-oh, hey. Hey-ya, ay-ya, hey-ha, hey. Hey-ya, ay-ya, hey-oh, hey. I hope you know I never wanna see you go. I hope you know you've always been the one. I hope you know I'll never break your heart in two. I hope you know there's no one else like you. Hey-oh, hey-oh, hey-oh.
And that was I Hope You Know by Superman featuring Ashley Hall. Thank you for listening to Music on a Native podcast, where we like to feature Native American artists and musicians and their music, so that way you can be more familiar with them. Thank you.
Article 11 here is kind of long. In consideration of the advantages and benefits conferred by this treaty and by the many pledges of friendship by the United States, the tribes who are parties to the agreement hereby stipulated that they will relinquish all right to occupy and permanently the territory outside the reservation as herein defined, but yet reserve the right to hunt on any lands north of the North Platte and on the Republican Fork of the Smoky Hill River, so long as the buffalo may range thereon in such numbers as to justify the chase. And they, the said Indians, further expressly agree, first, that they will withdraw all opposition on the construction of the railroads now being built on the plains, that they will permit the peaceful construction of any railroad not passing over the reservation as herein defined, that they will not attack any persons at home or traveling, nor molest or disturb any wagon trains, coaches, mules, or cattle belonging to the people of the United States, or to persons of friendly therewith. Fourth, that they will never capture or carry off from the settlements with white women or children. Fifth, they will never scalp white men nor attempt to do harm to them. Sixth, they withdraw all pertinence of opposition to the construction of the railroad now being built along the Platte River and westward to the Pacific Ocean, and they will not in the future object to the construction of railroads, wagon roads, mail stations, or other works of utility or necessity which may be permitted by the laws of the United States. But should such roads or other works be constructed on the lands of their reservation, the government will pay the tribe whatever amount of damage may be assessed by 3 disinterested commissioners to be appointed by the president for that purpose. One of the said commissioners to be chief or headman of the tribe. Seventh, they agree to withdraw all opposition of the military posts or roads now established south of the North Platte River, or that may be established not in violation of treaties herefore made or hereafter to be made with any of the Indian tribes. So just setting up kind of the rules of like, we're going to build roads, we're going to build railroads. Here kind of comes with that. Article 12, no treaty for the cessation of any portion or part of the reservation herein described, which may be held in common, shall be of any validity or force as against the said Indians, unless executed and signed by at least 3/4 or all adult males occupying or interested in the same, and no cessation by the tribe shall be understood or construed in such manner as to deprive without his consent any individual member of the tribe of his rights to any tract of land selected by him as provided in Article 6 of this treaty. Article 13, the United States hereby agrees to furnish annually to the Indians the physicians, teachers, carpenter, miller, engineer, farmer, and blacksmiths as herein contemplated, and that such appropriations shall be made from time to time on the estimate of the Secretary of Interior, as will be sufficient to employ such persons. Article 14. It is agreed that the sum of $500 annually for 3 years from date shall be expended in presents to 10 persons of said tribe, who in the judgment of the agent may grow the most valuable crops for the respective year. So that's where they start saying you grow best, you're going to get a reward. So they're playing favorites too. Article 15, the Indians here named agree that when the agency house and other buildings shall be constructed on the reservation named, they will regard said reservation their permanent home, and they will make no permanent settlement elsewhere. But they shall have the right, subject to the conditions, modifications of this treaty, to hunt as stipulated in Article 11 hereof. Article 16, the United States hereby agrees and stipulates that the country north of the North Platte River and east of the summits of the Bighorn Mountains shall be considered to be unceded Indian territory, that also stipulates and agrees that no white persons or persons shall be permitted to settle upon or occupy any portions of the same, or without consent of the Indians first has obtained to pass through the same, and it's further agreed by the United States that within 90 days after the conclusion of peace with all bands of the Sioux Nation, the military posts now established in this territory in the article shall be abandoned, and that the road leading to them to the settlements of the territory of Montana shall be closed. So that's kind of saying that Montana, it's Indian land, that was their hunting land, it was common,
Right.
and that changed, right? And then the last article, Article 17, it is hereby expressed, understood, and agreed by and between the respective parties to this treaty that the execution of this treaty and the ratification by the United States Senate shall have the effect and shall be construed as abrogating and annulling all treaties and agreements herefor entered into between the respective parties. Hereto, as far as such treaties and agreements obligate the United States to furnish and provide money, clothing, or other articles of property to such Indians and bands of Indians as become parties to this treaty, but no further. In testimony of all which we, the said commissioners, and we, the chiefs and the headmen of the Brule and Sioux Nation, have hereunto set our hands and seals at Fort Laramie, Dakota Territory, this 29th day of April in the year 1868. Right there you had N.G. Taylor, W.T. Sherman, Lieutenant General W.M.S. Harney, Reverend Major General USA John B. Sanborn, S.F. Tappan, C.C. Auger, Brevet Major General Alfred H. Terry, Brevet Major General USA Attest A.S.H. White, Secretary, executed on the part of the band of Sioux by the chiefs, headman, whose names hereto annexed on therefore day. And then they have all the native folks, which, I mean, you're talking, they had that's a long ass list. All the different bands, like you said, like they had the Oglala band, they had the Brule band, they had, and it shows you who, like Hunsnigasnoskin marks his ex marks Mad Shade,
Right.
his Arx Max Whirling Heart. And that's the other thing, they just signed X. They didn't sign their name, they signed X.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, you had the Mini Konju band, the Yakatonis band.
You know, in
Different
our
is,
family, from this is from what my dad told me, but not for sure, is our family, our pumpkin seed was the original man on our rolls. He was under Red Cloud's band, according to my dad. But my cousin I talked to was not sure which band, if we were under Crazy Horse or Red Cloud. I think we were under Red Cloud though, because he lived more in the Platte River, Nebraska area. And that's where Tall Woman, who he married, Pumpkin Seed married her, and she was from that band. So
interesting.
yeah, which is that was the southern end of that treaty, was the Platte River area.
And they're the Oglala, right?
Yeah, that's where Red Cloud was born, was near there, was Platte River.
So the Oglala folks who signed the treaty right here. So executed on part of the Oglala band of the Sioux by the chiefs and headmen, whose names as hereto subscribed, they being there unto duly authorized at Fort Laramie on the 25th day of May in the year AD 1868. Man afraid of his horses, White Hawk, Black Hawk, Black Tiger, Bad Wound, Grass, Ghost Heart, Crow, the Brave, Sitting Bull, Whirlwind Dog, Poor Elk, Medicine Eagle, High Wolf, American Horse, which American Horse is Thea's family, Man That Walks Underground, Four Bears, one that kills the bear, one that kills in a hard place, the Poor Bull, Mad Shade, Whirling Hawk, Black Bears, Fool Hawk, Waha Kesa Haha, they don't have his name, Big Mouth, Bad Hand, Red Thunder, one that cuts off, one that presents the pipe, Fire Thunder, Bear with Yellow Ears, the Little Crow, the Blue War Club, the Blue Horse, Quick Eagle, Black Bull, the Bear Hide. And then who attested that? They had the S.E. Ward, Josh C. O'Connor, J.M. Sherwood, W.C. Slicer, Sam Dion, H.M. Matthews, Joseph Biss. Nicholas Janis was an interpreter. Lefroy Jott was an interpreter. And Antoine Janis was also an interpreter. So that's who dealt with the Oglalas.
That's the delegation, I guess you could say.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
But there's thousands of people from all these tribes that were not right then and there, their delegations. But
no, and that's right, exactly what you're saying. It's when it's happening at that moment on that day, who's around, because that's who the U.S. dealt with. They didn't say, hey, who are your leaders?
No.
They were like, who are the top people here right now? Get them around here and let's sign it. Because when you have guys like Little Shell, like our tribe, he's out hunting, you know. And when they talk about the treaties, he's like, that's not our agreement. We don't agree to that. So they're also, the U.S. government's looking for those opportunities to say, no, we got majority say, we got this, right? So it's not necessarily happening willingly either.
It's not even a vote, so to speak, either, in a way. Like,
right.
Because you'd have councils with tribes that had their system and they're sitting in a circle and more people were included. And I'm sure like women have a voice even than like comparing it to our modern kind of,
No, exactly. You're onto something. Because
obviously were like highly respected for their wisdom and life experience, and it's like,
no, exactly. You are exactly right.
I'm glad you read all the articles, because there's all these like components of like what a treaty looks like, and like it's pretty extensive.
Well, and it's interesting too, because like you take that, like there's not a lot to that either. Like there is a lot, but at the same time too, that's where it's being up for grab in the courtrooms. That's why it's being challenged. So there is a lot of uncertainties to treaties. That's why the U.S. government, they did that purposely.
Yeah.
So that they could get into places like the Black Hills. Yep. They could go here and there. They can kind of, well, we found this. Now we have this right. Well, now that we're, right there with you, we're getting our legal degrees. Indian country's doing its stuff. We're there. And it's exciting. And it's exciting to see us use these treaties that were created to force us onto reservations and to force the assimilation against the US government. We're using it against them in ways to say, no, you said we could hunt across the border there in Wyoming and get an elk. And they did. The Crow did. And good. I'm glad they did.
Well, and it's like technically based on this treaty, I could go to the Black Hills National Forest and kill a deer, and the treaty.
Well, that's
Yeah,
where,
that's real, like
I agree with you in a sense, and that's where like those gray areas come into play, because there is those, like, certain tribes have set up their own fish and game departments on the reservations.
right.
But you're on to something in the sense of, like, the state of South Dakota should allow all tribal members
Yeah,
the access to a state of South Dakota conservation license.
right.
You know what I mean? And say, no, you're a tribal member, you get a free hunting and fishing license.
Yeah.
You can get, maybe a free deer tag in the state of Montana. Maybe, like, the elk you still got to put in for, the bison.
Yeah.
You get better odds towards getting those because of that. Like, those systems, that's where these fish and game departments and the state senates and the state legislators need to figure it out. Is
I think it'd be a fair system for like just use me an example. If I like hunted on the reservation, got their little tag, got a deer there, but then I could go get another one in the Black Hills. I could get two.
right, and you're going to survive off that meat because you're not going to buy a cow.
Elk, I could do bison as well.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying, is like,
But it's not over hunting either. I get the conservation in the day we live in. I think that's a reasonable ask. Is it
no,
not?
and no,
Like,
and like something like that, to me, like the licensing, something like a simple license of, like, hey man, you're like, I'm an enrolled Little Shell member.
right.
Why can't I get the Montana license paid for? And I say conservation because that's your fishing too, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's $30 for an in-state resident, right? But there are, due to forced assimilation, people were forced to assimilate. Tribes were forced to assimilate. We were forced to go to the American cities and get educations and to go to get school to survive, right? We had to adapt. So we don't necessarily, like, how many Little Shell, due to that 100 years of fighting the federal government, don't live in Montana.
Right.
But yet we don't get certain rights, right? Certain people, like, you don't live in with your reservation, or you don't live around an IHS, or don't have certain opportunities, you don't get those, right? Even though you may be Oglala, or you may be something. So there's just different things like that
There's something.
it sounds good in theory, but in reality, it's not.
Right. Oh, I mean, I'm gonna be going to an IHS clinic now at Chamala Indian School, and it's like everyone around, it's a little bit crappier than Grand Ronde, because Grand Ronde's a different, more of a private system in a sense.
Right.
And we've had this discussion with healthcare already, but it is, I just noticed the way they communicate, and it's like, yeah, it's a little bit lower. I mean, I don't need much, I go in for my checkups, I'm gonna get some
Right.
done. But
No, I feel you, because that's definitely, I think your
I-
Chamawa IHS is probably very similar to the one here in Fort Peck, where it's like, it's still that kind of government funded and government run system versus like Grand Ronde, where you're saying where like the tribe has taken more of a control.
Right. Well, yeah, it's like in Reservation Dogs, the Indian clinic with the
Yeah.
and the gum. It's like, that's your Indian clinic.
Yeah, it's almost like, what are you doing here? And it's like, I'm here to use the services. No, I'm just kidding. Like, I get it. I get what you mean.
Yeah.
But it all comes from this, and it all stems from these things. It all is this history, and it's all this understanding. Like, we spent how long in school talking about the American Revolutionary War and how Britain taxing the colonies was bad, but we don't learn about treaties like this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the purpose of today's episode was to start off a new category of like, here's some historical moments that
Right.
go untalked about. And today we talked about the Fort Laramie Treaty.
Yeah.
And that to me, I'm excited to get this episode published. I'm excited to get this out to you guys. I'm excited to hear your feedback. So we're kind of running low on time. Matt, is there anything final you want to drop about the Fort Laramie Treaty or today's episode?
Yeah. I was just gonna say, for the viewers, people listening, like if they want to learn more, look at the area you live in, and just do a little research about the history of the treaties in your area, and you learn more about the area you reside in. It could be a city, it could be a rural area. Just there's a treaty somewhere, and there's some tribe that probably got displaced, or maybe they're still there if you're living in a res or whatever. But yeah, there's always.
When you lived in Coeur d'Alene there, Post Falls, wasn't there a Treaty Rock?
Yeah, that's actually a really cool place. Right on the lake, just down from the college there, North Idaho College. There's the Treaty Rock that was with the Coeur d'Alene tribal leaders, and I think I learned how to say this right. They call themselves Shitsuumsh people. Is in course Coeur d'Alene is a French word meaning heart of the awl, AWL, not owl, like all like a hatchet or something. And so that's what they call themselves. But that beautiful area by that lake, where they had villages, I imagine that was a beautiful setting when they were living there,
Oh,
fishing.
I'm sure.
Now it's a resort town by a lake with $1 million homes.
Exactly. No, yeah, exactly. And that's how they see it. They see it as that. They don't see it as the homelands that they once were.
Yeah,
But
they got pushed about, I don't know, 40 miles south of there, still into some beautiful land, but they just have a little tiny section of the lake where it's kind of marshy, not as
Well,
nice.
but you talk about the even north of there, those valleys going north, right? North Idaho, and just the way like those tribes, the elk and the bison that were over that way. People don't realize that like there were mountain bison.
Yeah.
There's a different type.
Yeah.
There is the mountain bison. You have the Columbia Plateau. Didn't you say there was Columbia Plateau bison at one point?
Yeah. And those are those same, like that in that area too is the start of the salmon culture going west, because that was
Right.
the west side of the Rockies, and those lakes had salmon all the way up to about there, around that area. They kind of, Montana didn't have them really yet, I don't think,
Right.
but
Well,
that's yeah.
no, yeah, no, and that's exactly it. But I mean, we can only go so long on this podcast. That's kind of a native goodbye there. We can get going down another topic, but that's for next time. We'll talk about the Coeur d'Alene tribe and their treaties, another podcast. That's why you guys gotta stay tuned as we turn these things out. Hopefully, we get a little bit more out to you as time goes on. But until next time, everybody, bye-bye.
I know ballers, I know chiefs, I know riders from the east. I know educated natives down to picket in the streets. Middle fingers to police, fuck you, we come in peace. I know red-skinned hippies that be giving me the creeps. I know beauty, I know beach, I know savages and freaks. And I know a couple cousins even bougier than me. No, ain't elite, bougie native, yes indeed. Art exhibit to the club, and we roll it 20 deep. Copper on my neck, gold on my ring, feather on my hat, skin stitched chin, 100 warriors on my back, they be drumming when I sing, man there ain't no way around it.
A Native Podcast is produced by G&G Advertising and Quartz Lake Productions.